Welcome to episode 87, Land Acknowledgement.
And Indigenous peoples.
Join us as we explore the ways in which we have learned so much about the Indigenous tribes here in San Antonio.
And as we apply that knowledge into our ritual practices and creation of land acknowledgements to be used in ritual.
Stay tuned. Welcome to the Witchy Wit podcast, where we look at life through a witchy lens. I'm KImberlyn.
I'm Leilani.
At Witchy Wit, we explore current events,
Ideas,
music and books,
and experiences in ways that recognize energy and life in everybody and everything.
We are both real witches.
And we bring two real perspectives through the lens of our different ages,
Races,
and backgrounds.
with a healthy skepticism for what we have been told is true. Our conversations are raw, candid, and vulnerable.
Join us as we cast a spell to uncover what we each know is true in our intuitive, witchy selves.
Welcome to episode 87,
Land acknowledgement.
Indigenous peoples. Okay. Good, we got that out. We had to just so you know, we had this discussion. It was I had a really long title, and so we were just trying to figure out what it is. So that's what it is. Okay.
So today we're going to start with a check-in, and then we're going to talk about the land acknowledgement and Indigenous peoples. We're going to speak about why we picked this topic. We're going to do a land acknowledgement for our city, which I think is a great kind of way of seeing what doing some research on the land and Indigenous peoples in the area is. Then we're going to apply that to what is that like in our ritual practice and how we utilized resources to do research on our own city, and then end with a poem.
Yes, sounds like a plan. And one of the first things you said was that we were going to do a check-in. So Let's check in. What's up with you?
I wanted to tell you a little bit about the process of me, a 41-year-old person who has good insurance, and I use air quotes good, but like pretty good insurance, what the process was like for me to get approval to get an IUD.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is like, I'm sure I could write a book on this, but just like to summarize, I had an IUD previously, a copper IUD, also known as Paragard. And my OBGYN, when I went in for my annual exam, told me it was time to get it replaced because every 10 to 12 years. And with the political climate and everything going on, I elected that I wanted to get it done now because copper IUDs, as well as like in vitro and other things, are like really...
They're on the chopping block.
They really are. And so I really loved my copper IUD, so I wanted to get it again. So I said, let's do it now. And she said, okay. And so then we like scheduled the date. And then a couple of weeks later, I got paperwork from my OBGYN office saying that the doctor's request for the copper IUD was denied.
Okay.
Yeah. So, again, I could like go talk about this for a really long time, but just to summarize, it was a 4-month-long process.
I was going to ask you, when did this start?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a 4-month-long process of me calling the doctor's office and going back and forth with them and like calling my insurance and going back and forth with them. And basically what it turned out was, because of all this stuff going on politically, they are billing it a certain way, which makes me have to pay for it out of pocket. And it would have been like somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000. Whenever I originally got this, it cost me more for the pregnancy test that they had me do at the doctor's office before they would insert it, like $20.
I'm speechless. I just don't know what to say. So
thank you for that. It was incredibly frustrating, and I am a native speaker. I am well educated. I have the ability to regulate my emotions in ways that allowed me to. I mean, it took me 4 months because I would get so angry. And I was calling people. I was calling the Paragard people.
And you had enough. You knew enough about the system to at least know where to make phone calls, whether or not they were actually solving the problem.
So again, I could talk about this for a long time, but to summarize, I ended up start trying to call other offices to see if they were doing the same thing. I could not find a single OBGYN in San Antonio or the surrounding area who would bill it the way that my insurance was saying it needed to be billed. So I called Planned Parenthood, and within 15 minutes of my call to Planned Parenthood, I had an appointment scheduled for the next week. And I went in, and Planned Parenthood served me, and it cost $0 because they billed it the way that the insurance needed it billed.
I'm almost in tears. I'm almost in tears because you got a 4-month runaround. Mm-hmm. And I'm imagining the number of women here in San Antonio, the number of women here in San Antonio alone who they're working, not 9 to 5, they're working 9 to midnight between home, children, and everything else, and trying to do something like this at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine all the people that would have, for various reasons, run into that first barrier and then now, no fault of their own, given up, and their lives are forever changed because they weren't able to get the health care that they needed.
I'm flabbergasted. I just don't know what to say. And I swear to you, this is just reminding me so much of A Handmaid's Tale. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, that disregard for your intelligence and your understanding of what you need.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, this was your story.
No, I appreciate, I find it incredibly validating that you, thank you for sharing that, because that's my experience. And I felt very alone and almost gaslit by our whole culture, that something that I must be doing something wrong. But so it's just, it's very healing to share the story and have you reflect it back in that way.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I hope your story at least gives other people, at least inspires them to maybe persevere a little bit more and to recognize that if they keep pushing that they can get this done. And it makes me want to thank the Lord or the goddess or whoever for Planned Parenthood.
Thank the goddess for Planned Parenthood.
They are still fighting they're actually fighting the fight that they fought, 60 years ago. Yes. And they're fucking fighting it again.
Yes, yes. And I thought, I donate to them every year. I thought that I would never have to utilize their services again because I have, air quotes, good insurance. You have right?
Insurance, right?
Yeah, I'm going to support them and donate so that other people can use them.
And there you are.
There I am, a 41-year-old with good insurance, walking into their office in tears because I'm so grateful. Thank you. I was just crying, and I was like, thank you so much for all that you do. Also, there were protesters outside.
Yes.
And I was escorted in by someone in a yellow vest to keep me safe because there were protesters outside. But I was in tears. Thank you so much for what I told every single person I met there. Thank you for what you do. You make a difference. Thank you so much. So that's my story.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you for listening. I have a lot of feelings about it.
I can only imagine. I have feelings, and it's not even my story.
Yeah. So. But thank you for listening. Thank you for affirming me, and thank you, Planned Parenthood, for existing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And what would you like to check in about?
Oh, well, mine is also about health.
Okay.
Not reproductive health.
Okay.
No. It's about my knee. So I have I've had arthritis for years, and it was exacerbated by being doing gymnastics with very little care. I mean, on my part and on my coach's parts, and just in the system as a whole, on the damage that we're doing to our bodies, etc. I'm sure you've seen that in the gyms. Anyway, so the doctor always said, well, you're going to have arthritis, and I do have arthritis, and it runs in my family. My mom had it, etc. So that's always been kind of a chronic condition. But then I injured my knee about 2 months ago. I think I mentioned it to you before, and it's just been giving me fits. And what would happen is it'd get a little bit better, and then I twist it. And so your knee joint is supposed to go in a bunch of different directions, unlike your hip or whatever. So it's meant to go in these different directions, but I would kind of catch it, and it felt like I was jerking it. It would catch on something and jerk, and then I'd be out for another week. So I went to a mutual friend's husband who is an Airasti doctor. So that's AI, because this is the plug, people. AIRROSTI. Airasti. It's a therapeutic modality that I think you're familiar with as well.
Very much.
And started seeing him about 2 months ago. Often, 2 months ago, let's just say 2 months ago. And the thing I like about Airasti is they're unlike maybe going to a chiropractor where you go in and they tell you, when your 20 sessions are going to be, et cetera. They're basically, their tagline is, "We fix pain fast," and they want to get you in and out of there. They want to, they pride themselves on how few appointments you can have and be back on your feet.
Yeah, their goal is 3 visits or less.
So I went to him, and he started doing some work, and they give you exercises, and I have like tools. You've seen a couple of them. Anyway, I just wanted to say, the past 2 weeks, because I was away, I'd done about 2 or 3, and then he said, well, the next one's on us, just come in and do a little checkup, and it's still, I re-injured it, so he extended it a couple of times. Anyway, I was away this past couple of weeks out in California, and I began to realize that my knee is much better, and then I began to realize that it's not like totally pain-free, because like I have a chronic condition, but it is the closest to being pain-free that it's been for years. The thing about it, what I find so fun, so I'm better, I'm ready for the Camino. The thing that I find funny about this is my body doesn't yet know that my knee is better. Yes. And so people keep saying, "Oh, you're limping, are you okay?" And I'd say, "Yeah, I'm fine," because my body keeps trying to coddle that knee. And when I'm walking with the dog, I recognize it, and I remind myself, and then I swing the foot out a little bit more, and with a little bit more determination, and it maybe it'll last a minute or two, and then if I start thinking about something else, I get back to so I just think that this is just so funny how I'm better and my body doesn't yet want to accept that. Isn't that the funniest thing?
It is so frustrating, I imagine. I would feel frustrated.
I remember years and years ago as a child reading a story about a dog who I think had broken their foot or something like that. And so they put a cast on it. And so obviously he didn't put any pressure on that foot. And they took the cast off, and he still wasn't doing it. So what the doctor did was put a cast on the other foot. And then he started walking on that one, and then they didn't leave it on long enough for him to start adapting to that. So, but do I have to do that to myself? Like, do I have to bandage my knee or whatever? I don't know what I have to. I don't know what the answer is, but I just find it really funny that if I don't catch myself, I'm still walking like I'm injured.
Here's a question. Will us walking with the trekking poles force you to have a balanced gait?
Probably.
I'm just curious.
Yes,
I wonder.
I tried using them once, but it was, it was really just me practicing because there was nothing really to dig into. It wasn't really helping me at that point. So it probably will, now that you mention it, because I will be too busy trying to figure out the trekking poles that I won't be focusing on my knee. So maybe so.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
We'll see.
Well, actually, I'm going to see this weekend, because on Sunday, I'm going to do a half-day hike.
Nice.
So I'll let you know. I'll report back.
Well, thank you for checking in about that.
Sure. I'm, like I said, I'm fine. I'm ready to rumble, but it's put back my long. I've always been doing the shorter walks, but it's put back my long walks. So I've got to ramp those up. So there we go. Okay, so that's our check-in. Let's move on to land acknowledgement
and Indigenous peoples.
So, would you like to share why we're doing this episode?
Yeah. So, I would say our biggest reason is one of our Patreonistas over on Patreon. My impression of her is that she has a deeply connected practice to Indigenous peoples, and so she brought it up because it's a really big. I think it's big part of her practice. So that was one reason. And I know that you had thought about doing it before.
Oh yeah, and I'd actually saved a bunch of links, and it kind of came out of something that I think you'll be talking about, just some of our practices in our circle. But it just seemed like it was just so kind of overwhelming. There was so much, and there were so many feelings in there for me that I would kind of open it, then not just close it, kind of thing. But because we were inspired by our Patreonista, it allowed me to just go ahead and jump in, and it wasn't as overwhelming as I thought it was going to be, and I learned so much. I mean, it filled in so many gaps in my knowledge. I didn't, there were a lot of things that I just didn't know. I kind of intuited some of it, so this was it was fun for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So one of the other reason that we were
is our circle had really educated me on the importance of this, and I had the opportunity to do a land acknowledgement in our Beltane ritual, which I'll talk about later. But just basically, like, I was thinking that as a witch, connecting with the land is so important to me. It's literally, and as an elemental witch, it's literally one of the 4 elements. Well, actually, all of the elements, but Earth is an element, but like all of the elements are there. And then also, it's like a point on the pentacle. Like, am I gonna walk the walk here with my beliefs? Am I gonna put my beliefs into action, or am I just going to like say that it is, but then like whenever the rubber meets the road, like not really engage? So that's kind of the talk that I had with myself before I dove into doing my own research and like taking responsibility to educate myself about the Indigenous peoples here.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know how you found it, but it was heartening for me. I went to one of the powwows earlier this year.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I thought I had said, maybe, I guess I didn't. Okay. Yes, I'd gone to one of the powwows, and there was another one just recently, but I knew I wouldn't be able to make that. There's 2 big ones. So yeah. And I've gone in the past, but I hadn't gone consistently. But because I had been doing some work with, I was teaching a class called Music Cultures of the World. So that one of the units had been on Indigenous people in the United States. So because of that work, and then the work that we've been doing in our circle, and then just a number of our friends have been diving deeply into that for their schoolwork, these issues have been rising and rising for me, and what I find fascinating, and we'll maybe talk a little about this a little bit more, is that as I think about this, these are not necessarily this is not my lineage, but the issues that we address when we talk about them, and when we work with these people and have conversations with them, are universal. And so it really allowed me to do some personal work as I thought about my interactions with some of the people here in San Antonio. So yeah.
And for me, I just want to point out that as we do this next part of the episode where we talk about the Indigenous peoples and territory that are the city that we live in is on, my hope is that it shows people the type of information that's available and inspires them to look at the places where they live,
where they are,
or the places where they grew up, and know that information is available there.
Right. And I would hazard that, we're going to share a lot of information about us because that's because that's us. Yeah, there we go. And I'm sure people will find it interesting, but I think they will probably find it a little bit more rewarding if they like dig deeply into the people where they are, because then there's that connection that's already there, right?
Yeah.
So encouraging. So shall I?
No, let's do it.
So the place that we now know as San Antonio is actually called Yanaguana. Or in the translation of that is the land of the spirit waters, which I find.
I mean, so like we're like one sentence in, and I'm already like, yes.
Like, okay, let's keep it up.
Done.
Keep stay linear.
Right.
We've got to talk, But and that name comes from a band called the Payaya, who belong to the Tatpilam Coahuiltecan Nation, and oh my gosh. So there's so much, and I'm going to just briefly give a few facts, but from what we can tell, there's archaeological evidence that shows that there were people in northeastern Mexico and southern Texas as early as 10,000 BCE, which is also called from 10,000 to 6,000 BCE, which is called it's kind of the end of the Paleo-Indian stage. And just for people who may not be aware, that's kind of the New World version of Paleolithic. So it's the correspondence to the Paleolithic period. But because these are people who came from Asia over the Bering Land Bridge, to what's known as North America, and then going down mainly down the coast down to Central and South America. There in this land, it's called the Paleo-Indian stage. Wow. Okay, so the nation, the Coahuiltecan, were hunter-gatherers, and they, like most people, positioned their villages near bodies of water because it was easy, to cook, to clean, et cetera, and rivers mainly. So of course the San Antonio River, which is a major feature here, and so because of that, and this is the part that that allows me to kind of imagine, it opens me up to imagination, is the fact that so much of their history is interwoven with the land and the rivers of Texas, and in the regions around us. So the more we learn, the more we recognize how much they lived in harmony with the land. How much many of their practices, their cultural practices, their language and their social structures actually reflect that relationship and shape their identity. So I think it's super important to recognize that, because as modern people, we can be divorced from the land upon which our houses rest. That these are people who were intimately connected with it. So a little bit more information, then we can move on. So by the late 1600s, we started to see a growing number of European invaders coming to this area, coming from eastern North America west, and basically they started displacing a lot of the northern tribal groups as they're moving. Obviously battling and fighting, etc., but ultimately, because of the sheer numbers, pushing those northern tribal groups out of their homelands and moving them further west. So what we start to see is this a number of newcomers to this area. So we see the Lipan Apaches, the Tonkawa, and the Comanches here. So they'd basically be anywhere from like the Dallas area down through, following like the 35. Because see, and this is the thing is, like we talked about with the Camino.
Yep.
35 didn't just pop up.
Right.
35 was on a route. That was on a path.
Yep.
That was, what I mean? So like even our interstates, for to a greater or lesser extent, it depends, are based on roads that had been based on paths that existed before. So so that we see that just along that corridor, we see a number of other tribes coming into this area, and obviously as they're being compressed, we start to see conflict between these tribes, because there's only so much land, and they're being pressed by the European colonizers. So we see a lot of conflict, but we also see that the Europeans brought disease, as well as just bringing guns, and literally killing people for their land. So, and then we see, so to kind of add insult to injury, we see that their life was further impacted by the arrival of missionaries who came, I'm sure, with all good, they heard that there were these people living without Christ, and they decided, they needed some Christ. So they came and they founded the San Antonio missions, which is a major aspect of life here. Everyone is, I don't know, a lot of people have heard of the Alamo, but that's just one of many missions that have, were founded here following the colonial.
Our baseball team in San Antonio is called
the Missions. Exactly.
Yes, it's a big deal.
Exactly. Following the Camino Real.
Yes.
So anyway, so they founded a number of different missions. One of the famous being the Alamo, and the idea is that. And we see this again and again and again. The Coahuiltecan were actually these great converts to religion because their lives had been so decimated. So they had so many hardships that this message of love and heaven, etc., actually appealed to them. So they were ideal converts, and I think many of them converted pretty rapidly. And whether or not they actually left behind their tribal practices is another thing. But one of the things, so you hear about, the missions and all of the things, one of the things that they don't say too much is the fact that all of the missions were built by enforced. They were not necessarily slaves, but they were enforced laborers by the Quehiltakan nation in various tribes. So finally, I just want to add this last piece of the history. During the 17th and 18th centuries, those that remained. Now we're talking probably about a tenth of the numbers of people from say 300 or 400 years previous. So they're totally decimated, but they lost their identity as tribes just to epidemics, warfare, migration, enforced migration, and then obviously the dispersion to the labor camps to build missions elsewhere. So and just demoralization, just like they lost their contact to, in many cases, lost their contact to tribes. And many began to intermarry with the Spanish. So we see that the missions became kind of this refuge for them, but also kind of an emblem of, everything that made them need the refuge, if that makes any sort of sense. So that's kind of the history. And can I give you a little bit more? And then, okay. And so today, as San Antonio is home to about 30, I'm going to say 28,000. I saw 30,000 someplace. And then when I went to a different site, I saw 27 and change. So we'll just say between 27 and 30,000 indigenous people, representing about 1.4% of the city's population. So, and then many of the members of the Quehiltakan nation are still fighting for representation and inclusion. We see this again and again. So in 2001, the city of San Antonio actually recognized the Tatpilam tribe of the Quehiltakan nation as the first tribal families here in San Antonio. And that they have a number, we'll talk a little bit more about them, but they have a number of different councils and ways in which they've been really, really fighting for representation, fighting for the retention of their rights. And so they have advocacy groups. They have people, writing. I looked at the list of the different letters that they've just sent. It's amazing. And then here in town, we have a member of their tribal council who is also the peace laureate, and I think his father was before him, Ramon Vasquez, and they were instrumental in creating this nonprofit group that we're familiar with, and that's the American Indians in Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions. So AITSCM, Anyway, but they created it to kind of share the history, to preserve the history for the indigenous here in town, who not only built the missions, but really lived and died at what are now considered a UNESCO heritage site. So I have a quote here, because he said, when you read like Texas history, he said that before his organization, and this is a quote, you would hear the history of San Antonio and you would think that when the Spanish got here, they were greeted by mariachis. Because that's, it was like they just totally blow past the native peoples that were here. And so they've done a great deal of work, and the missions have finally grudgingly begun to acknowledge it. They actually have a good program with a video and exhibits, etc., called We're Still Here. And so, I'm going to put the links to a number of these things in the show notes for people who might be interested in following this a little bit more.
And I want to add, as somebody who didn't know anything about any of this, and then as someone who's lived in San Antonio, one of the parks downtown in Hemisphere Park is called Yanaguana Park. Yes. And it's a playground that has integrated artwork into the playground.
Oh, right. And fountains, right? Is that the one with the fountains?
Yeah. And there's like a big blue cat, and it's really beautiful. But the artwork is based on one of their myths. Oh, so because it has like a thing that looks like a river running through it. It's artistically supposed to represent a river, but I just knew about Yanaguana Park, and it's like a really fun place to go downtown. And so I've been there a bunch. And then it wasn't until you gave a land acknowledgement in our circle that you started speaking about, and you mentioned that this was Yanaguana, and and then my brain exploded. Yeah.
that there are these hints that people can piece together. It's not as prevalent as it should be, considering it's a major part of our history, right? But it's there are little bits here and there. So yeah. So so one of the just kind of finishing up this discussion, and then we can move on. But part of the struggle for the tribal council, there's a number of different organizations, but they all kind of have a lot of the same people, and they have like slightly different purposes. Has been to one of the main is to get acknowledgement of so much of Native remains that have been stolen from this area. There was many members of the Tatpilam tribe traveled to California back in I can't remember. 2017. Yeah, to get 26 ancestral remains that they had dug up back in the 90s. It was UC Davis. It was at UC Davis that the remains were found. I don't know who did the actual dig. I'm going to assume someone in the UC system. And they took them back to, just like, okay, wow, Indian bones. Let's just take them back. Like that's someone's father. That's someone,
Yes. Like it was treated more like a souvenir.
Like a souvenir, like a dinosaur.
Than a human.
Yeah. So, and in fact, when I was doing some research for this, one of the things that I found was a news report from last fall that the Witchy Museum, so this is a science museum right here in San Antonio, they've been in negotiation for 5 or 6 years. They're going to return indigenous remains to the tribe. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't know if it's actually taken place. Most of the news reports were in the fall, and they said it was going to happen. So I don't know exactly when that was going to take place, but they were excavated between the 1930s and the 1980s, so that long period there. And then in 2013, when the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act was updated and created a way for these people to kind of connect with these institutions, because I think on some parts the institutions were willing to give them up. They just didn't have the means to do so legally without like being sued for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
So the Witchy is set to return about 31 set of remains to be buried in West Texas. They have 62.
What are they doing with, my question is, what are they doing with the rest?
Well, funny you should ask, because the Witchy doesn't actually want to disclose where the rest of those remains are, because they say for safety reasons, because probably like a bunch of people go in and take it, because they're not theirs. But a number of them are kind of holding on to some loopholes to just say that they're categorized as culturally identifiable human remains.
What does that mean?
It means that someone is not bothering to do a DNA sample.
Yeah.
Because basically you can do that, right?
Right.
But the Witchy does say that that with the guidance of the Quihiltecans, that they will get closer to making amends. They do want to make, there's guilt, right? I don't know how much guilt, and guilt has to be filtered through shame and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, they do say that they want to do some work. Okay. Check.
So not to summarize, but as I listened to all of that, it sounds like with a bit of elbow grease, you were able to find some really interesting information about the land. And also, as somebody who's lived here for over 20 years as an adult, I didn't know any of that.
I would hazard that many of our students are not being taught that in their Texas history.
I went through Texas history in San Antonio, and I certainly was not taught that. I do remember being taught about about indigenous people who lived here, but it was all past tense.
Oh yeah, who lived here? Yes, yeah.
And it was never taught under the context of like they lived here and they still live here. It was always a past tense, and then Spanish people and white people came in and things move forward. Like that's kind of how it was.
Like they left, they somehow went somewhere and here's some land.
Yeah, like I can honestly say I never even considered, it was like, so these indigenous people lived here, then the Spanish and the Europeans came, and I never even crossed my mind that what happened to them. It was just like they were there and then moving on.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I remember reading a few years ago a book that takes place about in the 80s and about the last few people in tribes in Oklahoma and Texas that were maintaining themselves outside of the reservations. There was it was couched around a woman who was half Indian. Or no, I'm sorry. I take that back. She was white, but she had been kidnapped and, raised as Indian. So, and then eventually repatriated, and how she tried to adapt to living in white culture.
Oh, wow.
And it's a true story. It's a true story. Like but, just the ways in which, for example, I'm just going to mention this in passing. I don't know if this happened in Texas. I know it happened in Oklahoma, where the Bureau of Land Management or the Bureau of Indian Affairs, excuse me, it was a really cold winter, and they gave them blankets that were infected with smallpox.
You're welcome. Like, what?
So
it's just,
yeah, and that was considered okay, because these were savages.
I'm sure they felt. Well, I don't want to
because
say
these were savages who were keeping them from moving west.
Yeah.
And taking land that's ours by, what was the doctrine? I can't remember. Manifest destiny.
I think it goes back. It's similar to the conversation we were having about the bones. Just that feeling of dehumanization and entitlement that just infects so many of these actions.
Right.
Even, and I would even argue the textbook creation that was used to teach me when I was a kid here that mentioned them in past tense and then never mentioned them again.
Because it makes it easier. And so one of the things, as we move, we're going to, thank you for listening to me share this history. But as we move into where we are now in our circle, one of the things that I'm constantly confronted with is, okay, we have this information. Now what do we do? How can we move towards a time and a period where everyone is respected and everyone is recognized for the gifts that they bring? And so... and what I don't want is to have this, there's nothing I can do and give up.
Right.
We've started having these conversations, and sometimes it can be very, very disheartening. And we can, take a baby step, right?
Well, I think that brings up a great point of applying this to our spiritual practice in our circle, like, why is this important to me as a witch? Why is this important to you? And one of the things that you just said really resonates with me, which is, as a witch, I take responsibility for my impact, even if it's hard. So just like you said, like it's like, it can be really disheartening reading all of this and unpacking all of this. And as a witch, that does not discourage me. I believe that I must engage, even if all I'm doing is becoming aware.
Exactly.
At least the least I can do in my spiritual beliefs is to engage and become aware.
And I remember, this is a quote from MASH. You remember MASH, the television
I
show?
do.
Okay. One of the jokes they were saying, the least you could do is this. And the guy said, well, never let it be said that I didn't do the least I could do.
I feel that.
Yeah, but so, one of the things, we'll talk about land acknowledgements, and I'd love to hear your journey as you go about this. But, as land acknowledgements become a part of the discourse, it is so easy, and I've seen this with institutions here in San Antonio, it's so easy to fall into this kind of performative land acknowledgement where you say all the right things, so it makes you look good. And what does it mean? Right. So, and to be fair, you have to start somewhere. And one of them is just acknowledging that, we live in a crappy society that have treated these people really shittily. I don't know if that's an adverb or not.
It is now.
But yeah, it is now. and so just acknowledging that is the first step, right? We don't want to wallow in just the guilt and shame, etc. We want to then move forward, but we've got to go through the guilt and shame. And that's why a lot of people don't want to address this, because they don't want to even go through that, the guilt and shame of what our society has done to these people. But what would you like to talk a little bit about some of the things that we've done?
Well, I'll speak to the one thing is that, so we started doing land acknowledgements at our gatherings, which a few women have done, and I was really moved by them, and I did my first one, which I'll talk about later.
Mm-hmm.
I offered my first one over Beltane,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's been something that's been really powerful for me. Could you share about the monthly contributions?
Oh yeah, sure, for sure. So one of the things, again, putting your money where your mouth is,
Yeah.
we can do an land acknowledgement and then saying, okay, these people have been treated, in a really shitty way. What's our next step? Doing a land acknowledgements is a good first step.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the things that we decided to do is to not just show support, but to actually support them in their struggle. And we're doing that by our circle has pledged to give a monthly donation. And which is, kind of like the least we can do, right? And I think I started to mention this before. So, and I support by going to the powwow and buying buffalo meat.
Yeah.
Which is super expensive, but it's like it's their herd.
Mm-hmm.
It's the local San Antonio group herd somewhere out in Southwest Texas or whatever. So I have some buffalo steak,
Wow.
which is pretty tasty, I have to say. Okay, awesome. Anyway, for people who eat meat, yeah. So there we go. So yeah, I mean, this was suggested by someone, and our council had this conversation, and it wasn't even a conversation. It's like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
let's do it. And so we every month it's not a whole lot, and hopefully the amount that we give will increase. Mm-hmm. But it's one way of supporting them. One of the things that we not struggled with, but we wanted to make sure about was, sometimes when people hear that you're a witch, they might not, want to have anything to do with you. And so people were concerned would they accept donations from us? And I sent a little email or whatever, and he said, yeah, for sure. It's like, you got money? Yeah,
we'll take it.
We'll take it. And I think we talked really briefly about kind of what we're about, and they were totally down with it. It wasn't an issue, but I get it. That might be, they may not want our money, but
they want our money.
They want our money because it helps them to.
Yeah.
It helps them to write these letters. It helps them to go and get their remains that are in fucking California because someone just said, "Oh, bones, let's take them, to UC Berkeley or UC Davis or wherever it was." Yeah. So that's one of the things. And then I think what's also very important is we've begun to have discussions about what it means to be a part of the systemic institution of racism and oppression, violence, degradation, and then how can we step off that wheel? So that's obviously an ongoing conversation, but that's been a part of it. And would you like to maybe talk a little bit about what that means for us on the ground in our ritual?
So I was really moved, by the way, as a non-council member, I was really moved to hear that the council had made that decision. And there are many moments in time where I feel such gratitude for the work our council does. And I feel proud to be a part of an organization that is represented by people like that. So just shout out to our council.
Yay!
Yay! And then we have been doing the land acknowledgements in our rituals. I've noticed that we've tend to be placing them, if anybody, as a ritual planner, if you're interested, in between the shedding, which we had formerly been calling purification, but now it's better and less gross by calling it
making it sound like we're dirty and disgusting, and then we get shiny when we come into church.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Right. We're moving away from that language. There's also some like racial stuff with purification, like that word, but calling it a shedding, as in like shedding the worldly things, shedding maybe the things that I was holding on to from my day, putting it between the shedding and the circle casting.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like, and I see this with other groups, that we put it very early so that we can not only acknowledge it, but maybe start making that spiritual connection.
Yeah.
As we cast sacred space.
And I love that you tie that in there, making that spiritual connection, because as a witch, the elements are very important to me. And what is the land if not literally the elements? It is the earth, air, fire, and water that I say that I worship. So this is important.
It's very important. And acknowledging that it's been walked on by feet that have been in tears or bloody, and it's been walked on by people who were in harmony with it, who knew how to love it. It's a layered, sometimes painful tapestry that we're a part of because we're walking on it now, right? And just that connection. As people know who've maybe heard some of our episodes about the Camino, we're very much interested in the ways in which we are the next link between the generation before, the generation that's after, and how far that link goes in either direction.
So I was thinking about that as whenever I was the lead priestess on the Beltane ritual, and it was important to me to do a land acknowledgement. And I'm going to be totally honest. I put it on the thing and I asked for people to decide how they wanted to participate, and nobody jumped in to do the land acknowledgement. And I was hoping somebody would, because I am uncomfortable. Yeah. It is new for me. Nobody did. So I was like, all right, here we go. So I started by doing research. And in just a moment, we'll kind of share those resources. But I did a lot of reading on different Indigenous community sites. I found out what tribes had been in the area, and they sounded like the ones that had been mentioned in other land acknowledgements. So I did a lot of research on the land, and then I did research on what is a land acknowledgement and how should it be. So I went to other Indigenous people's websites that talked about what to include in a land acknowledgement. And then one of the things that I thought was interesting was it said, like, why are you doing this? Why is it important? And the answer that I had a lot to that was because it's important to my spirituality, not only ethically, but also, like, I worship the fucking land.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So if I do, like, this is a part of the land. And if I do actually worship it, and in reality, not just like, oh, trees, oh, rivers, wow, hug a tree,
nature,
right?
Yeah,
like,
I love nature.
Yeah,
I
like
heart nature.
I heart nature. Woohoo! Let's go for a hike, which is all great. But, like, if I really do worship it, if I really do honor it, then this is a part of it. And now is my time to step up, even though I was hoping someone else would do it.
Yes,
like now is the time for me to do it. So, I also looked at the ritual that I was doing, and because I didn't want to just make the land acknowledgement performative, I tried to take the land like a more generic land acknowledgement, and then tie the themes of the ritual into that land acknowledgement to make it not just feel like something I slapped on. Insert land acknowledgement here, but as a part of the workings, because, like we just said, the land is a part of our faith, so it should be a part of our workings.
Right. Exactly.
So I thought I might read it.
Yes,
and I just want to read it coming from a space that, like, I am no land acknowledgement expert, but I just want to give I'm actually really I feel like nervous about sharing it, but I want to share it because this is my first attempt at a land acknowledgement, and this is the first thing that came from me doing all that research. It is not perfect, but I'm sharing it from a space of, if I can do it, hopefully I can help other people move forward. For sure. So this is not like a shining example of, like, a perfect land acknowledgement. This is just my land acknowledgement. And even so people know, I have the names of the tribes written down in phonetics because I don't know how to pronounce them.
Ah, okay.
So I also did research on how to pronounce the names. So this is the land acknowledgement for our Beltane ritual. I wish to acknowledge that the lands we stand on are lands that were walked, loved, cultivated, and lived on by peoples long before I arrived. I ask you to consider your connection to the history of this land. And then I gave some space, but I won't give that here for brevity's sake. But then I gave the ritual attendees some space to consider that. I wish to acknowledge that the importance of the land I wish to acknowledge the importance of the land in my spiritual practice. The trees, the water, the location of my house, the land this place sits on. As a witch, I honor a deep connection to the land I walk and its history. How is this land important to you? Again, I gave the woman space. I speak the names of the native people and the territories as a way to disrupt and dismantle colonialism. and then I mentioned some tribes that are in our area. I also acknowledge that our circle makes a recurring donation to the American Indians of Texas at the Spanish colonial mission. As I ask you to consider how you disrupt and dismantle colonialism and center Native people and Native lands.
Nice. Very nice. I was kind of hoping to hear you say the tribes, but that's okay. You don't have to.
I can.
Can you?
Yeah, because I wrote it out.
Okay.
So if you could see, I have like it listed at the bottom. Jumano, Tonkawa, Kawawiltakan, and Lipan, which I also found people pronounce it Lipan.
Yeah, Lipan or Lipan.
So I'm not sure, but I like use some pronunciation things to help me learn.
Yeah, and you want to say some of the places that you used?
Yeah. So I used, so how did I do my research? I used, my favorite place that I went that I found that I kept going back to was Native Land Digital, and their address is native-land.ca. And it walked me through the process on how to write a land acknowledgement, as well as gave me a lot of research materials. And then the pronunciation, it also told me that I needed to work on my pronunciation. And so then I Googled the tribal names and how to pronounce it. And then there was even audio that I could listen to.
Great?
And like the person's like mouth would like move, it was like a digital thing.
Good.
And it told you how to pronounce it. And then, so nativeland.ca, it's a website, and they also have a mobile app developed by First Nations. And it's a really great resource. It has an interactive map. It has like an entire globe that you can like interact with and like move and zoom in. So you can manually do it, or you can even like, I typed in our zip code. And then it like zooms in, and then you can see. And it's really cool too, because it's not just like one thing. Like there are different colors for different tribes, so this shows how they overlap. So that's really cool. And then another thing that I think is really awesome, there's a land acknowledgement hotline that you can text.
Cool.
And then you can text your city and state to learn more about the land. And so that number is, and that's through a different organization, but it's the land acknowledgement hotline. It's 1-907-312-5085.
Yay. Cool.
There you go.
Thank you. So one of the things I'd like to just kind of talk briefly, as we were thinking about these issues in our circle, we began to recognize ways in which we might be playing a part in the oppression, playing a part definitely in the appropriation of their cultural resources without acknowledgement of them. And so it actually, I think, spurred a new kind of atmosphere in a new environment in our group, in as much as now we haven't done as much as we used to chants that may have like pulled in Native tropes, because we're still kind of working our way through who owns it, who gave us permission to use it, that kind of thing. But one of the things that we began to realize as we started to dig deep into these chants is how little we actually acknowledge each other. Like, so for example, we'll sing a chant, and this woman that we know in Oregon wrote it, and do we acknowledge her?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter that she's white or whatever, but the very fact that the matter that we just sing it like, oh, yeah, we love this song, and not acknowledging that someone went to the trouble of writing this and, sweating the rhymes, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think it's just made us more sensitive to humanity in general, to acknowledging the efforts of people, some of the women in our own group who have written chants or created elements that we draw upon for our ritual, and people outside of our group, and so it's, I think one of the fascinating parts of this for me is how sensitive I've become to what am I doing when I choose a chant or a ritual tool. Why am I choosing it? What does, so that sensitivity about it, for some people, they might find, oh, well, that just slows things down, or, why are you making it so complicated for yourself? But it adds a richness to it, because then I'm thinking about, oh, this chant came to us from Cascadia Witch Camp, or it came from, someone who wrote this for a witch camp in Australia, and somehow, you know what I mean? So by kind of thinking this through, it's, I'm sure on a certain level to cover our asses so that we're not, inadvertently appropriating something. It's helped me to just recognize the richness and the diversity of the tools and the music that we have before us.
And you're like leaning into this whole connected, but also different tangent we could go down on, which about appropriation.
That's another episode.
And I know, and I honestly, it's on our list of episodes to get to, but boy, if that's not a bear to wrestle.
Yeah. I think that's going to be a two-parter.
Yeah. Yeah. But it also important.
Because it's important. And that's, it's very thorough.
And I don't have all the answers. I don't, there are people that have PhDs in this that are studying it, and I don't know that they have the answers either, but it's important to me to lean into that.
Right. And if we do have the answers, then also, how do we get the dominant culture to recognize that actually is the answer, and we can't afford it, and we can't do this, and but that's another discussion for another day. So, our poem is written by Joy Harjo, who is a poet, musician, and playwright, a member of the Muskoke Creek Nation, and appointed the United States Poet Laureate in June 2019. And she's the first Native American Poet Laureate in the history of the position.
Wow.
So, yeah. So this poem is a wonderful one. It's kind of, I think, speaking to anyway, you can tell who it's speaking to. The title is For Calling the Spirit Back from Wandering the Earth in Its Human Feet. I love that title. Put down that bag of potato chips, that white bread, that bottle of pop. Turn off that cell phone, computer, and remote control. Open the door, then close it behind you.
Take a breath offered by friendly winds. They travel the earth, gathering essence of plants to clean. Give it back with gratitude.
If you sing, it will give your spirit lift to fly to the stars' ears and back. Acknowledge this earth who has cared for you since you were a dream planting itself precisely within your parents' desire.
Let your moccasin feet take you to the encampment of the guardians who have known you before time, who will be there after time. They sit before the fire that has been there without time.
You're kind of swooning.
Oh, I am.
Let the earth stabilize your post-colonial insecure jitters. Be respectful of the small insects, birds, and animal people who accompany you. Ask their forgiveness for the harm we humans have brought down upon them.
Don't worry. The heart knows the way through. There may be high-rises, interstates, checkpoints, armed soldiers, massacres, wars, and those who will despise you because they despise themselves.
The journey might take you a few hours, a day, a year, a few years, 100, 1,000, or even more. Watch your mind. Without training, it might run away and leave your heart for the immense human feast set by the thieves of time.
Do not hold regrets. When you find your way to the circle, to the fire kept burning by the keepers of your soul, you will be welcomed. You must clean yourself with cedar, sage, and other healing plant. Cut the ties you have to failure and shame.
Let go the pain you are holding in your mind, your shoulders, your heart, all the way to your feet. Let go the pain of your ancestors to make way for those who are heading in our direction.
Ask for forgiveness. Call upon the help of those who love you. These helpers take many forms: animal, element, bird, angel, saint, stone, or ancestor. Call your spirit back. It may be caught in corners and creases of shame, judgment, and human abuse.
You must call in a way that your spirit will want to return. Speak to it as you would to a beloved child. Welcome your spirit back from its wandering. It may return in pieces, in tatters. Gather them together. They will be happy to be found after being lost for so long.
Your spirit will need to sleep a while after it is bathed and given clean clothes. Now that you can have a party, invite everyone you know who loves and supports you. Keep room for those who have no place else to go.
Make a giveaway, and remember, keep the speeches short.
Then you must do this. Help the next person find their way through the dark.
Amazing.
Thank you for finding your way through the dark with us as we navigate this complicated but important topic. We hope you have enjoyed the magic that has unfolded here at Witchy Wit.
It would be great if you would help make Witchy Wit possible and get access to exclusive content by donating on Patreon.
We'd love it if you join our Witchy community and enjoy shareable content on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Would you do us a big favor and support us by rating and reviewing us wherever you get your podcasts? It's free and helps witchy folks find us.
Feel free to email us at witchywitpodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from our community. Reach out and let us know what's brewing in your cauldron.
New episodes are released every second and fourth Friday. Follow us on your favorite podcasting platform so our episodes go right to your playlist. You can listen as you ride your broom.
Stay witchy, y'all!